Picture this. You're sitting at the kitchen table. Maybe it's a Sunday dinner, maybe it's Christmas, and your dad leans back in his chair with that look on his face. You know the one. The look that says he's about to dispense some serious wisdom. And he says something like, "Just buy a house, kid. They're not making more land." Or maybe it's your mom telling you to stay loyal to your company because a good pension is worth more than any salary. Or your uncle, who swears that a savings account at the local bank is the safest place for your money. And here's the thing. They're not wrong to give you this advice. They genuinely believe it. Because for them, it worked. Their generation bought houses that tripled in value. Their generation got pensions that paid out for 30 years. Their generation put money in the bank and it actually earned something. The advice they're giving you isn't bad advice. It's just advice for a world that no longer exists. And following it in today's economy isn't just unhelpful. In some cases, it's actively making you poorer. My name is Fabian, and on Build Wealth Together, I spend a lot of time thinking about money and why the strategies that built wealth for one generation can completely fail the next one. If you've ever felt confused about why you're doing everything your parents told you to do and still feel financially stuck, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Because today, we're going to go through the 5 pieces of financial advice that your parents swear by and that the data says are seriously hurting you. Now, before we get into it, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about blaming your parents or dismissing everything they taught you. The fundamentals, spend less than you earn, don't go into unnecessary debt, save something every month, those are still true. What we're talking about today is the specific advice that made sense in the economic environment your parents grew up in, but has quietly become outdated, misleading, or in some cases, completely backwards in the world you're actually living in. Because the economy your parents navigated and the economy you're navigating are not the same animal. And pretending they are is costing you real money every single year. Advice number 1. Buy a house as soon as possible. This is probably the most universal piece of financial advice that gets passed down from parents to kids. Buy a house. It's an investment. You're throwing money away on rent. Real estate always goes up. They're not making more land. And look, for your parents' generation, this advice was basically correct. If you bought a house in the 1980s or early 1990s in most Western European cities, you probably did very well.
Bravo!
Interest rates came down significantly over that period, which pushed property values up. And perhaps most importantly, house prices relative to income were completely different from what they are today. In 1990, the average house in a major European city cost roughly 4 to 5 times the average annual salary. Today, that same ratio in cities like Amsterdam, Munich, Zurich, or Vienna sits somewhere between 10 and 15 times the average annual salary. In some neighborhoods, it's even higher. Think about what that actually means in practice. Your parents could buy a house by saving aggressively for 3 to 5 years and putting down a reasonable deposit. Today, saving the same percentage of your income for the same period of time gets you maybe a third of what you need for a deposit on an equivalent property. The goalposts didn't just move. They moved to a different city. But here's the part that nobody talks about. Buying a house is not automatically an investment. It is a place to live that happens to have financial consequences. Say you're looking at a flat in a mid-sized European city priced at 400,000 euros. Your mortgage at current rates might sit around 4% on a 25-year term. Your monthly mortgage payment works out to approximately 1,690 euros. But your real monthly cost of ownership, including property taxes, maintenance, insurance, and repairs, is probably closer to 2,100 to 2,300 euros per month. Now compare that to renting a similar property for 4,400 euros per month. That 700 to 900 euro monthly difference, invested consistently in a broad index fund earning 7% annually, compounds to approximately 170,000 euros over 15 years. I am not telling you never to buy a house, but the blanket advice of buy as soon as you possibly can, no matter what, ignores the actual math of your specific situation. Your parents didn't have to run this calculation. You do. Advice number 2. Stay loyal to your employer. Your parents probably worked for the same company for 20 or 30 years, and somewhere along the way, they told you that loyalty matters, that you should build your career in one place, that job hopping looks bad on your CV. Here's what the data actually shows. The average annual salary increase for an employee who stays at the same company sits between 1 and 3% per year. The average salary increase for an employee who changes jobs sits between 10 and 20% per jump. If you stay at your current employer for 5 years and get average raises, you might be earning 8 to 10% more than you started. If instead you make 2 strategic job moves over that same 5 years, you could be earning 25 to 40% more. On a starting salary of €45,000, that difference over 5 years is somewhere between €40,000 and €60,000 in cumulative additional income. After 10 years, the gap becomes almost impossible to close from the inside. Your parents' generation had a very different deal with their employers. Loyalty was genuinely rewarded because companies offered defined benefit pension schemes, long-term job security, and incremental promotions that actually led somewhere. Most of that deal no longer exists. Companies restructure, they outsource, they automate. Changing jobs strategically, investing in your skills, building an external professional reputation, these are the loyalty strategies that actually pay off in today's economy, not loyalty to a logo on a building. Advice number 3. A savings account is the safe place for your money. This one is genuinely well-intentioned and genuinely harmful. Your parents probably told you to keep your savings in the bank. Don't take risks with your money. A savings account is safe. The stock market is gambling. And in the world your parents grew up in, a savings account actually made sense. In the 1980s and early 1990s, savings account interest rates across Europe regularly sat between 5 and 10% annually. Your parents could put money in the bank and watch it genuinely grow. The bank was doing the work. Here is what a savings account offers you right now. In most European countries, the best available savings rates sit between 2.5 and 3.5% annually. That sounds reasonable until you factor in inflation, which has averaged well above that figure for most of the last decade. What this means in plain terms is that money sitting in a savings account is losing purchasing power every single year. The number goes up, the actual value goes down. Meanwhile, the stock market, which your parents told you was gambling, has returned an average of 7 to 10% annually over the last 30 years when invested in broad diversified index funds. Not individual stocks, not crypto, just boring, diversified, low-cost index funds that own a tiny piece of thousands of companies across the global economy. Say you have €20,000 to put away for 20 years. In a savings account at 3% annually, you end up with approximately €36,000. In a broad index fund at 7% annually, you end up with approximately €77,000. Same money, same 20 years, completely different outcome. The gap is not small, it is life-changing. Advice number 4. Get a pension through your employer and you'll be fine. Your parents were right that pensions are important. Where the advice goes wrong is the assumption that whatever pension your employer provides is enough on its own. Your parents' generation largely benefited from defined benefit pension schemes. Your employer promises you a specific monthly income in retirement. The risk was on the employer. You showed up, worked for 30 years, and collected a predictable income for the rest of your life. Most of those schemes no longer exist for people entering the workforce today. What replaced them are defined contribution schemes, pensions where you and your employer both contribute money that gets invested, and whatever it grows to is what you have. The investment risk moved from the employer to you. The predictable income guarantee disappeared. The default contribution rates for most employer pension schemes across Europe sit somewhere between 3 and 8% of your salary. Financial planners generally recommend saving between 15 and 20% of your income for retirement. There is a gap there, a significant one. And if you're relying on your employer's default contribution to carry you through a 25 to 30-year retirement, you are going to feel that gap very personally at exactly the moment when you have the least ability to go back and fix it. Advice number 5. Avoid debt like the plague. Your parents probably told you that debt is bad. Don't borrow money. Pay cash for things if you can. Only spend what you have. And emotionally, this advice comes from a completely understandable place. But here's the thing about debt that the avoid it at all costs mindset misses completely. Not all debt is created equal. Destructive debt is credit card debt at 18% interest. It's car loans that stretch 7 years for a vehicle that depreciates 20% the moment you drive it off the lot. Your parents are absolutely right about this kind of debt. Run from it. But strategic debt is something completely different. If you can borrow money at 4% interest to buy an asset that appreciates at 6% or generates returns above 4%, you are using debt to build wealth, not destroy it. This is how businesses operate. This is how sophisticated investors think. The blanket, all debt is bad framework your parents gave you is too blunt an instrument for the financial decisions you're actually facing. It prevents people from taking out sensible mortgages. It prevents people from investing in their own education and skills when the return is clearly positive. The updated framework is simple. Debt that funds consumption is almost always destructive. Debt that funds appreciating assets at an interest rate below the expected return can be a powerful tool. Learn to tell the difference. So here's the thing about your parents' financial advice. It came from a place of genuine love and genuine experience. They told you what worked for them. The problem isn't the intention. The problem is that the economic conditions that made their strategies successful have changed dramatically. And advice that doesn't update with conditions becomes a liability instead of an asset. 3 things worth doing this week. First, run the rent versus buy calculation for your actual local market using your actual numbers. Second, look at how much of your savings is sitting in a low-interest account earning below inflation. Any money you won't need for 5 or more years almost certainly belongs in a diversified low-cost index fund. Third, find out your actual pension contribution rate and run a basic retirement projection. The gap between what most employer default contributions produce and what most people need in retirement is significant. And the earlier you find out, the more time you have to close it. Your parents built their financial lives with the tools and conditions available to them. You're building yours in a different world. Same values, different strategies. Don't let advice from a different era cost you in this one. I'll see you in the next one.